this computer. Okay, so hello everyone. We're here today. Welcome to the New Directors Virtual Dialogues with the Youth Jury of the 23rd Vancouver Latin American Film Festival. We acknowledge that this festival takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We pay our respects to past, present, and future generations of these beautiful lands where we get to share our stories. The New Directors Virtual Dialogues are presented by Peliplat, the online community for film and TV lovers. You can find the full BLAF 2025 program in their catalog and rate and review your favorite films. My name is Ana Tonso. I'm the Youth Jury Coordinator here today with Venezuelan director Lorena Alvarado and the Youth Jury, the cohort of 20 local youth that get to watch, discuss each film with the directors behind the project, and finally award the Youth Choice Award for the Best New Director in this category. Today here with Lorena Alvarado from Venezuela, her film, The Lost Chapters, is a docu-fiction that explores the topics of memory, cultural heritage, exile, return, identity, and family bonds across generations. So, hello, Lorena. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for your time and thank you for your beautiful project. We're very proud to be able to showcase it, and it was a beautiful film to watch. So we're happy to hear you and hear all about your film. If you want to tell us a little bit yourself and a little about your project, The Lost Chapters.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone so much. I'm Lorena. I'm a Venezuelan filmmaker, and this is my first feature film. It's, as Anna mentioned, it's a docu-fiction hybrid, and the characters are my family members playing fictionalized versions of themselves. So it's my sister, my father, and my grandmother. And this film started originally as a documentary. I wanted to make a documentary about my father's bookstore. And every summer and every vacation that I go to Caracas, I would film a lot and spent many years kind of digesting the footage. And at some point I realized that I wasn't interested in doing a traditional documentary. And so that's when the idea of making a fiction came in. I wanted to introduce myself in the film some way, but I didn't want to be in front of the camera. And so I had sort of a eureka moment when I realized that I could do it through my sister. And so I asked her if she wanted to be part of the project, and she said yes. And so she kind of became like this proxy of myself. Like I could live vicariously through her in the film. And yeah, so I wrote basically a fiction story with the script, and it didn't have any dialogue. It just had written scenes, and we shot these scenes. And yeah, so it's kind of like real ingredients, but the recipe is fiction.
Okay, Lorena. I am going to begin today with a question of a youth jury member that couldn't make it today. His name is Leo. So he wanted to know, how did you decide which parts to fictionize and which parts, how was that decision making of in the process?
So the search for the book is fiction, and I wanted to have an excuse to go through Caracas and something that would be a vehicle to take these characters outside of the house, because the first half of the film is just in the house and it's very insular and intimate. But then when Anna and her father start searching for this book and to learn more about this writer, this is kind of an excuse for them to leave the house. Um, and so that was the main fictional component. And then I had just a lot of scenes and ideas in mind that I wanted to film. And, they just weren't real things that were happening. And so a lot of moments that happened in the house were kind of prompted by a fictional idea. Like I would prompt my grandmother and my sister to play around basically. And so a lot of the scenes were sort of improvisational, but they stemmed from an idea that I had. And all of the ideas, I wanted everything to kind of touch on this idea of memory. And so I came up with a lot of scenes that I thought explored this theme in, in varying degrees of subtlety. And we filmed a lot. And then the editing work became kind of discarding all the things that didn't work and all the things that felt too exaggerated or too fake. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but everything was kind of like a mix of reality and fiction.
Yes, Lorena, you did. Thank you so much. We're going to go forward with one of our youth juries present, Cristina Vadillo. Would you like to make your question?
Hey, hi, nice to meet you. I'm sorry, my camera is not working, so
No problem.
okay. Well, my first question is, what was the biggest challenge you had to face when you made this documentary?
Mm, I think the biggest challenge then became a virtue. I think the biggest challenge was not having any resources or budget to work with it. And at the beginning, that felt like a big limitation. But then I embraced basically shooting the film by myself and with one other person. And I think that's what allowed the film to be so intimate and personal because we didn't have a big crew. So so yeah, it was challenging because I self-funded it and it was very, very limited and a lot of equipment was borrowed and a lot of favors and that was challenging, but at the end, I think it helped make the film better than if we had had like a big crew and all a bunch of resources.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena, for your answer. Now we're going with Sophie.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Lorena. Nice to meet you. Um, so I loved like going home after watching the film and like looking up Elvia online and finding it on Amazon for like 40 Canadian dollars and then going on YouTube and like finding the Rafael Bolívar Coronado like essay, the video essay. Um, and I just like found like all these like literary bits and bobs that you included so fascinating. Um, and I was just wondering how you built that narrative for the film and how like what really is the significance of Venezuelan literature for you and your family and like your dad's bookstore. And if you could also talk about the postcard that Anna finds.
Um, well, my dad is a bookseller and he's had a bookstore since I was a teenager. So I grew up in his bookstore and it's always been very important for me and my sisters. Um, I think it was very foundational to who we are. So, and growing up as a teenager, I would also go with him to all the other bookstores and to search for and to buy books at libraries of people that were leaving the country. And so kind of when I show Anna going around the city with him, that's what we used to do as teenagers. Um, so that's very much part of my childhood that I wanted to kind of recreate and kind of do an homage to the booksellers of Caracas. And then I also wanted to, through Elvia, I wanted to, so it is actually the first novel that mentions oil. And it is actually written by an author that no one knows anything about. Like there's not any biographical information by him. So there's this suggestion that maybe it was actually written by another author in the film. And I was interested in kind of presenting this book because it mentions oil, but in a subtle way. And I kind of wanted to, oil is so important to Venezuela and it always is kind of at the forefront of a lot of conversations. And I wanted to kind of mention it in a subtle way through the book. And a lot of the decisions that I made were trying to be as subtle as possible because I think, everyone knows the Venezuelan crisis and we've all seen kind of horrible images of the country. And I think I was very tired of seeing kind of a unidimensional vision of Caracas and of Venezuela. And so I kind of wanted to explore the country and all these themes that are subtly depicted in my own very soft way. Then what was the third part of your question?
Oh, about the postcard that Anna finds.
Oh, the postcard.
Yeah.
So the postcard is fictional. So we basically made the postcard. And it was the way to kind of jumpstart her interest in Bolívar Coronado, in this writer, and in Elvia, the book. So yeah, that was we basically made the postcard, and that's the main fictional component that kind of yeah, jumpstarts her search.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you for letting us into your process. Isa, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Isa. Um, there's a lot of memory involved in the film, like in a lot of different ways. And I'm curious about like how, like through the process of filming and producing and directing your family, how does that connects to you, like to your memory and how, and if that changed, like how you had memories from back home or like how you see yourself. Um, yeah, I'm kind of curious like that because I think memory is kind of like all our memories are kind of fictional in a way because they change over time. Yeah, so I'm curious if like your memories and your perspectives has changed since you started and like going through the process and then with the project finished.
Yeah, I love that question. Um, so I left Venezuela when I was 19, and I'd go back during the summers and Christmas, and every year there was a sensation that things were changing a lot because a lot of people were emigrating and the crisis was getting worse. But then also the sensation that things were the same, which is alluded in the poem, because my father has stayed there, my grandmother's there, and so the house has kind of been maintained this like time capsule. Like that house is like 70 years old, and it's my father was basically born in that house. And so it's kind of this strange feeling for me of going back home and feeling that it's a country that is in ruins, but somehow this house is maintained intact. And at the same time, I always had this feeling of like, whenever my grandmother dies, then this place will end. And I think that's a very universal thing that happens to everyone. Like people die and things change, and what we think is permanent is not permanent. Basically, nothing is permanent. And so through the film, I kind of wanted to come to terms with this and also to sort of immortalize my fantasy of my childhood and immortalize my grandmother's house. And so there was an urgency also for me to make the film of feeling like my grandmother is getting older and I only have this limited amount of time to capture this place. And so, yeah, in a sense, it was me trying to conserve this memory of this place through my fantasy of it. So I love what you said about memory being fictional because we're always kind of changing and editing how we see the past. But ironically, a film becomes this document also. Like I don't plan to edit it again. So it's ironically that it becomes kind of this solid document that I can refer to. And memory was always at the core of the film. Since the beginning, I wanted to explore memory, and I found a way to explore it through the three characters. With Anna, it's her coming back home and kind of trying to piece together her memories and what she was back home and feeling kind of displaced or disconnected. Then there's the grandmother that's literally losing her memory. So that's a very literal exploration of it. And then the father character, as a bookseller, he's trying to kind of conserve the memory of the country. And he goes to a lot of houses of people that have left the country, and he's collecting these rare Venezuelan books and trying to create a museum. So he's doing this work to conserve literary patrimony and to conserve the memory of a country. So yeah, these were the three ways that I explored the theme of memory.
Thank you, Lorena. We're up next with Alfredo now.
Hola Lorena, mucho gusto.
Hola.
So I'm interested in the work that you did with the spaces that you shot at and with the people that you worked with, right? Because when I was watching the movie, it struck me how authentic the performances and the interactions that the characters had with each other. And then I checked your IMDb and I saw that everyone shared your last name. So I was like, okay, so they're probably related to you. And now you're saying that you confirmed that. So I'm interested in like knowing how did you approach them with the idea of making a movie? And have they acted before? And how was the experience of like maybe taking people that have never acted before and that are part of your life into what you say that it was a small film set, but the camera is still intimidating usually when like someone is filming you. So, how to make them get to that point where it's very clear that to me that you knew these people very deeply because of the way that you were able to make them perform, I would say. So how was the whole process of doing that?
So it started as a documentary. So I had been filming my dad for a while. So I think he was used to the camera. Um, and so it had been many years that I was kind of pointing the camera at his face and it never became a project. So I think he was kind of skeptical that it would ever become anything. So by the point it became more formal and it was like a fiction film, he was already like, okay, just, whatever, just make a film. So he was on board since the beginning. Then my grandmother, I think she didn't really fully understand what we were doing, but she was on board because it was just kind of like playing around in the house. It was just us kind of doing this theater every day. And it was very fun. And we're so close to my grandmother that it just felt like playing. And the camera, even though you're right that it's always this presence, we always kind of had it around. So a lot of the film I shot it by myself. And then a part of it was shot with a very close childhood friend that he was also kind of part of the family. So we always kind of had the camera and the audio equipment around, and we alternated between hanging out and filming. And so I think it was very seamless when we were shooting versus when we were just spending time together. And I think that helped to be able to capture things in an authentic way. And the scenes that I would write most fiction and ask them to perform didn't work, and I had to discard because they just felt super fake. And so I think the work became trying to make the scenes as close to something that they would actually do. So I wasn't actually asking them to act too much. They were just being themselves. And I started actually asking them to repeat dialogue that I had written, and I very quickly realized that that didn't work. So instead of telling them to memorize lines, I would just say like, this scene is Anna coming back after having been in the bookstore and she shares this book with her grandmother and you guys improvise. So I realized that that was a better technique because they weren't actors. And it also opened up the possibility for improvisation or things to happen that I wasn't planning. So yeah, that kind of became my strategy to tell them what I wanted the scene to be, but let them play with it. And then trying to repeat it a few times.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Love the concept of the theater in the house and the playfulness of creating with your family.
Thank you.
We've got Dana up next.
Yeah. Hola Lorena, I'm Dana. Nice to meet you. I really love this film. I wanted to tell you that. It was really heartwarming when I watched it, and it also seemed so natural and so casual, like taking a glimpse into these people's lives and getting an idea of a country through that and history and memory and everything. So it was really, really wonderful to watch. One of the main things that I had after watching it was thinking that it was a movie made out of instants, just this tiny glimpses into their lives that are just making a larger story that you don't get to fully appreciate until you get to the end. And one thing that was very interesting to me is I read an interview that you did with The Peak where you say that you want this film to be seen as a poem, which I found very fascinating. And so I started thinking of this instance as the verses that make up this entire poem. So I wanted to ask you how you picked this tiny verses, how you picked this instance, and even how you picked how to arrange them. Because with so much footage, I imagine that it was a challenge kind of figuring out where you wanted to place everything and how you wanted to play with it and the story that you wanted to make every instant tell. So I was just interested in knowing how you decided to put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Thank you. I love the idea of the fragments of the film being verses. That's really beautiful. Um, yeah, I wanted the film to feel like accompanying Anna a summer at home. So to feel like these fragments of her trip. And honestly, editing it was very intuitive because I already knew the things that I thought worked and didn't work. And I wanted it to be as subtle as possible and kind of as real life as possible. And I think a lot of the feedback that I got during the editing process was that it was too vague and like nothing really happened and there wasn't kind of like a straight storyline. And I was tempted to do something more conventional and then I kind of realized that I can embrace it being a poem. And I was very inspired by this book I read by Kiarostami that's called Lessons by Kiarostami. And he talks about seeing a film as a poem and not having to feel forced to have this like A, B, C, and to kind of like tell the audience everything that happens, but leave things incomplete, leave things as questions. Like that's okay. You don't have to tell the audience everything. You can leave holes for people to interpret and for people to complete. And I think that kind of gave me the inspiration or the agency to be like, the film can be vague, can feel like a poem. And then when I realized that I could do that, I think then I just worked on finding the scenes that were most emotional to me. And yeah, to kind of have this moving element that you don't really know what it is, but you kind of finish the scene and you feel something. I think that became kind of the guiding point of the edit. Like, do I feel something after this scene finishes? Yeah.
Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Dana.
Yeah.
We have Soa up next.
Hi, Lorena. I wanted to ask you if there's a significance for you or for your family in the movie for the scenes that featured the Universidad Central de Venezuela. Because I went to see the film with a Venezuelan friend of mine, and later on she pointed out that, oh, she graduated from there. She's like, I think they call themselves like the UCBistas, like the people who graduated. Yeah. So I just want to know if there's any like significance for you there.
So I didn't go to the UCB, or my dad didn't either, but it's a very emblematic campus. It has all these art pieces and the murals, and I would go there for like theater performances. And there was also this time that there was a lot of like sellers that would sell like burned DVDs there. So I would go there with my dad and buy these burned DVDs. So it was just a place that was very emblematic in my adolescence, even though I didn't go to that university. And the murals for me were something that was always kind of marked in my memory. And so in the film, I wanted to revisit these places that for me are like kind of like marked forever in my brain. And so those murals were one of them. And I just kind of wanted them to walk through the university. And it's very empty. A lot of people think that it's a museum. And I kind of wanted that to be suggestive of kind of the status of the country now, that it also feels very ghostly and empty. So yeah, it's like ironic that the biggest university is completely empty and that you could think it's a museum. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Up next, we have Rami.
Hello, Lorena. Very nice to talk to you. I was really interested in the film, and I found something that really sparked, I felt like I want to talk about, was a parallel that I saw between dementia and false histories. I felt like there was something also previewed in the editing style that you used, where you have ellipses of time that are never complete. I felt like they all matched together, and I was wondering where in the process did that come? Was it something that you had in the script? Did the parallels were they found in editing, or if they were in the script, what inspired it?
Yeah, I think the film has a lot of like false promises. Like it kind of like suggests something and then it doesn't follow through. Or what you're saying, like I show a scene of my grandmother leaving the house and then it's never explained, like, did she disappear? Did she come back? And that was very much on purpose. And I wanted to kind of do this very how would I explain it? Like create kind of like this fabric of moments that aren't completed. So you're kind of left with this feeling that you complete yourself. And Bolivar Coronado, this character that wrote under many pseudonyms, he also has this kind of false identity, and there's many holes in his biography. And so I wanted this to touch upon the idea of Alzheimer, dementia, that you kind of have like holes in your memory. And the title of the film kind of touches upon that too, like these lost chapters or these lost moments. And I think that applies in a personal sense, like in a macro sense of the family, but then also in a bigger sense in the country. There's also this like mention of a son that emigrated to Chile, but then we don't know anything else about him. And I show portraits of other family members that aren't mentioned. So yeah, I kind of wanted to create this tapestry of suggestions of people and memory and cultural references and historical references, but not go into it. So there is this sense of dementia in a bigger scale throughout the film.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Yes, that's indeed very beautiful. Okay, up next we have Cass.
Hola, Lorena. First, I want to say that was a beautiful film. It left me thinking. It has been a while since the movie left me thinking. I think this whole idea of lost chapters is gonna I'm trying to piece the parts and complete it by myself. However, the part that kind of caught me more like stuck in my brain was the locations, first the house and then the city. I was thinking as like you having like certain relationship with the city, how was that process of choosing what to show, what beauties of your city to show? Because I imagine it must be also with recollections of yourself or with stories that you have been told of the city itself.
Yeah, all of the places I chose were either connected to books, to the book selling life of the city. There's this bridge that has a lot of informal book kiosks. There's La Pulpería del Libro, that's one of the biggest bookstores in the city. And my dad, he goes to these places all the time and he's friends with all the booksellers. So that also made it very easy to shoot there because I was just like, I want to shoot here. And he would call and be like, okay, we can go tomorrow. And I'm like, well, but I'm not ready to go tomorrow. Um, so it was very easy to have access to these places. And then the other places were kind of cultural, significative landmarks of the country, also connected to books, like the UCV, which is the university, the National Library, that is when Anna goes and she's kind of like looking through this newspaper machine. Um, so I wanted to kind of visit places that were homes of books. Then there's also the scene of them in the motorcycle. That avenue is so emblematic in the city, and I always growing up, whenever we got into that highway, I just remember being transfixed and mesmerized with the play of the mural. And so that was an image that I really wanted to capture somehow in the film. And it was the hardest one to capture. And I kept being like very stubborn about it. Like my partner and collaborator that came, he was just like, we should cut that scene. Like we don't need them riding a motorcycle through that street. And I was like, yes, we need that shot. And it was just because it's such an emblematic image in my brain. And so yeah, that was the hardest shot, and I was very stubborn, and I wanted that. Um, and other than that, I think everything else was in the house. The house kind of became a character in itself. Um, and shooting B-roll became as important as shooting scenes where people were talking, because I think the objects in the house also spoke a lot about the house and about the people that lived in it. Um,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Cass. Up next, we have Solen.
Hola Lorena, soy Solen. I really loved your work. I watched it with my parents and it was beautiful. We really, really liked it and all the nuances that you brought into it. I'm really curious about how you characterized yourself through your sister and how that process was liked. Because you mentioned that you would like tell them like a prompt and they would just have to act it out. But I still wanted to see like how you still told her to bring your own vision, your voice, what you wanted to say in this work through her. And even in the cinematography, I did feel like you were trying to protagonize also like how maybe like the process of your grandma's like vision would be like how she would see the world, and then also how Anna would see the world, and by extension you would see it. So I'm really interested in all of that connection and yeah.
Anna, I think, was the only real actress in the film because she was kind of my accomplice throughout the whole process. And her and I are very close, and we share, similar affinities. And she's a cinephile, and she immediately knew what I wanted to do, as opposed to my grandmother and my dad didn't understand really what I was doing. Um, and so she was my accomplice throughout the process. And she was also very instrumental in helping me write a lot of the scenes or coming up with a lot of ideas. At the end of the day, we would sit together, like her, me, and Jose, um, our other collaborator, and we would kind of discuss what we had shot and what had worked and what hadn't worked. So the whole production was it was always changing, and it was very collaborative, and she was very much part of this creative process. Um, and so shooting the scenes, a lot of times she was more aware of what I wanted the scene to evoke. And so I think a lot of times she drove the scene. Like she prompted the conversations, she prompted whatever the father did or the grandmother did. And this was super important. I think otherwise we wouldn't have been able to capture half of the things that I wanted to do. Do you had a second part of your question? I forgot.
Um, and also just like how was your process to through like the cinematography that you wanted to sort of like go about like the visual direction that you took? in the shots and how you compose them and who you wanted to like really like bring out with that with like the lens. Um,
A lot of the shots are very static, and they were because of the limitation of just being me or me and another person. So it was kind of like we spent a lot of time composing the frame, but once we had decided like this is the shot, the camera would kind of stay there. And then it became more of like moving the people around. But then there are a few shots that there is movement, and that was more intentional. Like, for instance, the scene that Inna's playing piano, then I show my grandmother, and then there's this image of Inna blurry, like playing the piano blurry. And with that, I kind of wanted it to be this metaphor of how my grandmother sees her and her blurring memories. So there are a few more intentionally cinematographically shot things, but overall, I would say it's a very static film, and I think that became a strength. At the beginning, I was like, I want to have movement, I want to have a gimbal, or I want, and then I having lacking resources then became like, no, let's make the scene interesting and not have to move the camera, and for that to be enough for you to stay with the people. So to have the people move you and not the cinematography.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Solen. Up next, we have Reni.
Hi, Lorena, nice to meet you. I wanted first to congratulate you for the cinematography. It was really, really beautiful. I think the cinematography and your grandma was my favorite part of the movie. And my question is composed of two parts, because I'm also a filmmaker. And the first question would be like, you shooting the film yourself and just one other person, like what kind of equipment do you use? Because like I know how hard it can be. And the second question would be like, how do you deal with copyright and all the permits to shoot like in the places of Caracas and also like copyright for the books? Yeah.
So we shot with a Blackmagic 6K, and that's because that's the camera that Jose has, and I really love that camera. I think it's very good. We shot with that and some lenses that he had, and we borrowed some lights in Caracas, and the audio equipment was like a Zoom H4n, like a very simple recorder and a boom mic and some lavaliers. So it was very, very simple. And like the Blackmagic is small, so I think that helped for it to be inconspicuous and to kind of blend in. Um, I think if we had had a bigger camera, it would have been more intimidating. And then copyright, most of the locations are just, there's no release. Like it's just like a casual agreement that we're there. I think the only place we got like a formal permission was in the university, like the last scene. But other than that, everything is informal. And yeah, the only copyright that we got were the songs. So yeah, don't tell anyone.
Thank you for that, Lorena. Up next, we have Cristina Erdoiza.
Hola Lorena, es un placer conocerte. Okay, my question is related a little bit about literature. I feel like in the film, books are an essential piece, not only as history preservers, but also as a silent way of people rebelling against oblivion. So I wanted to ask you, how do you consider that young people that are apart from their country can be more invested on consuming their Latin American literature?
I think there's always a bit of a gap when you're abroad of what is actually happening in a place. But I think there are a lot of bookstores and magazines and people that are working to kind of share and expose literature from all around Latin America. And I think it's just about like tapping into these places wherever you live. I'm sure there's like a Latin American bookstore in most cities, and I think it's about like tapping into that community that can kind of open doors or suggestions, or you can learn things about through the community. And then for people that are lucky enough that are able to go back home, I think having the chance to reconnect to literary spaces in your home country is amazing. Like being able to go to bookstores and but yeah, I think it's a hard thing to do abroad as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Christine. I think up now it is Marcela hasn't had her question yet.
Hola, Lorena. Nice to meet you. I also really love the film. I watched it with my mom, and both of us really thought that the film felt really real and that this nostalgia is also very close to us, so we really loved it. Something that really got my attention watching the film was nature and plants, because they gave a lot of life to the house, and seeing the grandmother taking care of the garden, and then seeing the flowers that by the end of the film are also getting dried up. I feel like it helped me also get this feeling of something that is feels permanent, but at the same time, you know that it will end, or time is passing in a different way. And I wanted to ask, what do you feel it's the importance of that, of the plants and the flowers in the film? Mhm.
I'm really happy that you mentioned that and that you appreciated that. My grandmother loves plants and gardens, and it's so important to her life to tend to her garden. And it's one of the things that she does every day with, she never misses kind of watering the plants. And now that she's losing her memory, a lot of times she does it way too much. Like she forgets that she already watered the plants. And Caracas is a very green city, despite it also being chaotic and contaminated. It's very green and it has beautiful mountain. And I remember always thinking that Caracas was ugly growing up as a kid because, I only heard negative things about it. And then there was a summer that a friend came to visit, and he was like, wow, Caracas is so green and it's so beautiful. And I was like, it's not beautiful. And then he's like, yes. And he mentioned all the things that he found beautiful. And that kind of made me appreciate the city. And I think because I left and because I emigrated and was lucky enough to be able to go back home, I think that allowed me to appreciate my city in a way that maybe I wouldn't have if I had always stayed there. I wouldn't have realized how green it is and how beautiful it is. And I think this was also very instrumental to making this film. The fact that I don't live there and that I have like this nostalgic kind of fantasy vision of it that is very not the reality. Like I don't think it's a documentary real portrayal of the city. I think it's my fantasy of it. And then I think also flowers and plants are a beautiful metaphor to life itself. This very fleeting thing that is beautiful for a moment and then it dies. And towards the end of the film, there's this shot of the flowers that are withering and decaying, and they're also beautiful, but they are dying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, Lorena. Up next, we have Gregor.
¿Qué tal, Lorena? Un placer conocerla.
Gracias.
I really loved your film. I really did. And there's so much I could relate myself to. The little experience with the filmmaking process, the black magics, having the family as actors. It must have been hard and interesting and fulfilling at the same time, but to enact something as great as that, I assume it takes a lot of truths to consider and then to place into film. I had quite a long question, but it's in Spanish. Now I gotta translate it. Sorry. I meant to ask you about if you ever deprive yourself from sharing too much of those truths. And in relation to that, I meant to ask you about there was a scene in the film with con tu abuelita, with your grandmother, in which she calls Francisco at some point, but then the scene ends and we cut to something else. And as you said, you were leaving some holes without feeling for us to, imagine. But I meant to ask you about that. Did you ever hear about that conversation or and if you don't want to respond, then that's okay. I understand. But I was genuinely curious about that one.
Thank you. Yeah, so she actually has talked to him, but she forgets. So they are sort of vaguely in touch, but not so much. So she actually has 8 children, like 8 kids. And so she does confuse a lot of the names. And originally, I wanted to explore more that, like the confusion of names and the kind of blending of identities between all the kids, all the siblings, all of my father's siblings. But then I think I wasn't able to accomplish that. Um, and I was also kind of scared of maybe exposing things that people didn't want me to share. And there was kind of a thin line between feeling like they're real people and they're real spaces. So I have a responsibility of, not of presenting them in a way that is respectful and that is truthful. And so, yeah, that became a question editing the film. Like I did take out a few scenes that maybe were too revealing or too intimate, or that were like, I don't have to share this with people. And I was really nervous to share the film with my family exactly because of that, because it's so personal. And I think the most delicate scene is the letter, the letter of Francisco, because he kind of mentions like his feeling of inadequacy compared to his siblings, and I was nervous for him to see that and for the siblings to see it. And yeah, I think I had a lot of questions of how much should I show, how much shouldn't I show? But at the end of the day, I asked myself, I'm showing these people with love and with respect. And so, at the end of the day, I felt like tranquil with that, knowing that I was presenting them with love and the film was only made with love. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you, Lorena. Up next, we're already repeating a few faces, so we're going to go with Alfredo.
Thank you. Also in the same idea of like us being filmmakers and wanting to like understand your process, because it's very inspiring to hear that you did this beautiful movie following your instinct and making specific like poetic use of film. But I do think, and I actually know that when you do that approach, that is kind of separated from like how production process should work, things work differently, right? So my question is, from the moment that you decided to make this a fiction, because you said that you were shooting like documentary style for many years before, from the moment that you decided to make this a fiction to the moment that you had your final cut, how much time did it take you? And also, since you directed, wrote it, produced it, and edited it, um, from your original idea that you had, that you said it was a script with no dialogue but just ideas, how much did it end it on the screen, give or take?
So, okay, so I started the documentary like 2008, 1918. So that was like 3 or 4 summers of shooting, and then like a break during COVID that I wasn't able to travel. And COVID being, indoors and for so long, that's the moment that I realized that I wanted it to be a fiction film, because I was editing the documentary footage and I was like, this isn't interesting. I don't want to explore this anymore. And that's, kind of massaging that and working on it for so long and changing things and writing things, that's when I realized like, oh, this can be a fiction. And so when I realized that, I started writing this script, I think in 2021. And then I shot the film in like January 2022 and the summer of 2022. So in January, I was by myself. And then in the summer, I was with my collaborator, Jose. And then for like a few scenes, we had a very small crew, like the motorcycle scene, the university scene, like the more complicated ones, we had like a crew of like 5 people. And then I would say from what I wrote, I think maybe 20% of it is the film. I think I discarded like 80%. But I think, I was able to do that because I was shooting in my house with my family. So I think that's like a luxury that you can only do if you have access to the people. If you're doing a film with actors and the set and, places that you have to rent out, I think you can't afford that amount of extra footage shots. But I think that was also a strength of like the limitation/strength of the film.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena and Alfredo. I did skip Ximena now that I'm realizing. I'm so sorry about that, Ximena. You can ask your question now.
Hello, don't worry. Hola, Lorena. Yeah, my question is about repetition. Yeah, I think it's very interesting when it's like in literature, but also in film. And I think it's a very human trait. And there's a poem, and then the repetition of Anna trying for her grandmother to remember the poem, and then also the conversations surround the same kinds of themes. And I thought it was a very interesting scene when Anna is sitting on the couch and then she asks her that she feels weird. She says that she feels weird, and then the grandmother is like, "Why are you weird?" And she says that it's probably because everything is the same. And I feel like that's very common when you leave your country and then go back and are like in the house with your family. And there's like this appreciation, but also, I don't know, the repetition and the monotonous. Is that the way it's said? Yeah, I think monotonous way of living. Yeah. So the question is if there was like a specific intention on using repetition.
Thank you. Yeah, that was intentionally also a way to explore memory because we remember things that we repeat. Like you learn how to play a song by repeating it a million times. And there's also this monotonous repetition in their daily activities. In the father looking for books, in my grandmother like moving things around, and this is kind of the routine of everyday life. And I think all of us have these repetitive, kind of mundane things that, we don't really think twice about it, but if you suddenly frame it in an interesting way, you can find beauty in it. And I think a lot of the process of filming was trying to find beauty in these mundane things. And a lot of times you appreciate that beauty by taking it out of its original space. I think my dad, a lot of throughout the process, he was like, "Why is this interesting? Why are you shooting this?" And for him, it was impossible to find the beauty in something that he sees every day. But I think, when you take it outside of that space and you show it to someone else, maybe they can appreciate the beauty. But I think I digressed a little bit. Repetition was very important. And also, because there was these scenes and these themes that I wanted to explore, a lot of times maybe they didn't work in one scene. And so I repeated it in another one. And so, we explored like the same idea in many iterations of it. And so then when I was editing, I had like a collection of, these moments that are repetitions. And I think that was mostly because we were trying to get good scenes of an idea, and we ended up repeating it a lot. And with the poem, for me, it became very much a core of the film that Ena is trying to get her grandmother to remember this poem because she doesn't want her to lose her memory. And she's kind of like very stubbornly repeating the poem. And at the end of the film, I think she realizes that her grandmother will not be able to learn the poem, and that the only way for her to keep her grandmother's memory is for her to learn the poem. So then there's this scene of Anna going around a tree trying to memorize the poem by heart. And for me, this is kind of like the closure of her coming to terms with the fact that my grandmother will die, or that she will not remember this poem. And I think that kind of mirrors me making the film as well, like trying to create this document that immortalizes this place and these people, because even though it won't last forever, I do have this thing that can last longer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena and Sime. We are running out of time for today, so we're going to go with one last question. Diana, do you want to go next? I think you were first.
No, gracias. Thank you, Lorena. It's been really inspiring hearing you speak about this whole process, and a very, very unique process. I really love how you talk about like the limitations as also perks of this entire film, and how they pushed you to find different ways of telling this story, and also made it more authentic than it could have been if it was fully fiction. And so I wanted to ask you how all of this process will inspire maybe further films that you'll make. Was this being your first feature and being so unique in the way that it was made and being made with your family as well? I wanted to know how you think this will inform your process in approaching further projects.
Thank you. So I'm actually working on my second film, which is a loose sequel to this one. And it stars my sister again. And I live in Barcelona. And the Bolívar Coronado, the writer, he actually lived and died in Barcelona. And most of the books that he wrote under pseudonyms were in Madrid and Barcelona. So the film starts with Anna arriving in Barcelona with a scholarship to do research on this writer. And she kind of loses interest in this project and ends up wandering around the city. And so the film also has kind of documentary components, but I think it's more fictional than the first one. And yeah, again, it stars my sister sort of as a hybrid of myself, a proxy of myself. So yeah, it's kind of the same process, but a little more fictional.
Oh, that's so exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the amazing questions. They're really thoughtful.
Thank you, Lorena. Thanks to all the youth jury team for joining us here today. And thank you, Lorena, for opening up our series of dialogues with the directors. We're very excited to have your project, and we're looking forward to seeing the rest of the category. So thank you for joining us here today, and big thank you from the VLAF team.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
Gracias.
Bye.
Thank you, Lorena.
Gracias. Bye.
Bye.